Namaste nerds, this is Navanad, the Budget Pub Stomper. Some of you are here for my budget stuff, and some of you are no doubt here to get good ideas for Pride Month. For the Pride event coming up. And so I'm going to try to satisfy both parts of that. So I've made some budget Pride decks, and I've made like a busted, like just cracked Pride deck. And then a couple of kind of in-between options. So I don't know how many of these decks I'm going to have time to go over. I don't want the video to be like an hour and a half or anything. But let's just start off with the $91.34 highly busted, highly synergistic. I mean, just when you look at this command zone right here, you should probably have a pretty good idea of what this deck is going to look like. Or if not, let me introduce you. So Magda just has the text that whenever a dwarf taps, it makes a treasure. Malcolm has the text that when a pirate deals damage, it makes a treasure. So if we have cards like Universal Automaton, Adaptive Automaton, our changelings, right? Bloodline Pretender, Amoeboid Changeling, our changelings are going to kind of get to double proc. Like if we have both of our commanders out and we attack with our say Universal Automaton, it's going to make one treasure for tapping and then another for contacting. So it's going to make two treasures. And so that's going to be like the main idea. There's a surprising amount of overlap in the like say Malcolm Kedis, like is it Malcolm decks, and in my personal build, and in the Magda decks, including my personal build. And so this just seemed like an obvious no-brainer. Like they're both going to want cards like Reckless Fireweaver goes in a lot of Magda decks and maybe all of the Malcolm Kedis decks. It serves slightly different roles or functions in both of those decks, but there's no reason that we can't make both of those functions kind of come to life in this deck. There's Niv Mizzet, which is a dragon. Maybe if you could play Magda, like is it Magda, it would make the deck. Well, here we are playing is it Magda, and definitely I think Malcolm Kedis almost always plays Niv. Well, I know my versions, even up to CDH budgetless, always plays Niv Mizzet. But we've got Skargan Hellkite too. We're playing on a budget here. We're at $91.34, but this is just kind of an infinite mana outlet that's also a dragon. So you can go super turbo fast and crazy with the deck. You can, there's, I would say, three ways that you could build a version, your own version of Magda and Malcolm. Because you're making treasures with both decks, you wouldn't really have to do too much to your, like if you have a Magda deck, you wouldn't have to do too much to make it very functional as a Magda and Malcolm deck, because as soon as you get a treasure, you can play your Malcolm out. So you can use one to supplement the other. You could play like a Malcolm deck and just add the Magda, because Malcolm decks like Magda. Magda works well on Malcolm decks. But you could also do what I've done here and just kind of try to find the pieces that have the best overlap, which I would say is pretty clearly going to be the changelings, and then some of these like Reckless Fireweaver effects, and then some of your effects that are going to change the type change effects. So Maskwood Nexus, you're going to find in a lot of Malcolm Kedis decks, and you're going to find it in, I think, virtually all high power or CDH Magda decks. So what this deck is going to allow us to do is double proc, double up on our treasure production, make a ton of treasure ASAP, and it's going to give us access to basically twice the win conditions. So you're going to have like a really high win condition density without actually taking away from the overall power level of the deck, because the win conditions in one deck tend to just be pieces in the other deck, and some of the win conditions they have in common. So for instance, we get to 10 treasure. Well, let's just say we get to 5 treasures, which should be, you could probably tell, this is not going to be a big ask. You get to your 5 treasures, however you want to get there. You run out like a turn 1 dwarf and a turn 2 Magda, and then turn 3 you're just in business, right? Play your Malcolm, double proc your dude, probably even on the $91.34 build. Just don't plan on the games going past like turn 4, I would say. But so let's say you get to your you've got your changelings out, your universal automaton, is on the battlefield doing its thing. You make 5 treasures. Then you can sack the 5 treasures through Magda's ability to get Maskwood Nexus into play. Oh no, I'm sorry, Clock of Omens. To put Clock of Omens into play. And then once you've got Clock of Omens in play, and you have one of your changelings that's an artifact, or something like Liquid Metal Torque that will allow you to turn your Magda into an artifact, well, then you can tap the Clock of Omens itself and your artifact dwarf to make a treasure. And that treasure is going to come into play untapped. And the Clock of Omens says once you tap your 2 untapped artifact, which again is going to be the artifact dwarf and the Clock of Omens. So you're going to tap both of those. You're going to have an untapped trigger. You're going to make a treasure because your artifact dwarf is a dwarf and it tapped, so it makes a treasure. That's untapped. So now you've got 2 artifacts because you're going to be able to untap, say, the artifact dwarf again with the untapped trigger that comes off a Clock of Omens. And then you're going to be able to tap those 2 artifacts to do it again and again and again to make infinite treasures. Somewhere along the line, you will sack 5 more treasures to get your Maskwood Nexus in play. And then once you have your Maskwood Nexus in play, you can tutor any creature you want onto the battlefield, and that could be, say, Reckless Fireweaver. And then when Reckless Fireweaver comes into play, from that point forward, all of these infinite treasures that you're making are dealing a damage to each of your opponents. And we've got a little bit of redundancy of that effect. We've got Ingenious Artillerist, which is basically the same thing as Reckless Fireweaver. So I want to just kind of show how these pieces overlap. So that's kind of how you use it with the Magda combos. But the way that this works for Malcolm is if you have Malcolm out and you've got Reckless Fireweaver or Ingenious Artillerist out, then if you have any of your type changes, again including the Maskwood Nexus, then that means because of Maskwood Nexus, your Reckless Fireweaver is a pirate. And Malcolm says that when a pirate deals damage, you make a treasure. And Reckless Fireweaver says that when a artifact enters the battlefield on your side, it deals a damage. And so if you have your Reckless Fireweaver out and you've got your Malcolm out and you cast your, or well, you don't have to cast it, maybe you use Magda to grab your Maskwood Nexus. When this comes into play, it puts a trigger on the stack. That trigger is going to be a Reckless Fireweaver trigger. But then Reckless Fireweaver is going to be a pirate, so when the trigger resolves and you ping somebody, it's going to make a treasure, and that treasure is going to proc it again and again and again. So that's some of the overlay in the deck. There's just tons of, I mean, it should be obvious if you just take a look at the deck. We've got pieces that kind of just work so well with either part, and they also work well together. So that's kind of the core idea, the concept of the deck. Play it. It's really fun. It's fairly busted. It's very affordable. Give it a go. Now let's move on to my Gitrog buddy here. Now this is just my $100 Gitrog Ravenous Ride with the tiniest little addendum. We have put Selvala Heart of the Wilds in the sideboard, but this is just meant to be in the command zone. So Selvala and Gitrog are just peanut butter and jelly. So the idea of Gitrog is you want to play a bunch of overstatted dumb creatures like this thing here, an 11/10 for 4 mana. You want to put that guy into play so that you can sacrifice it with the Gitrog monster to draw 11 cards. So you're using the Gitrog monster to turn these overstated creatures like your 7/6 for 3. You're going to turn them into card draw. Now what Selvala does, obviously, is she turns your overstated creatures into mana generation. And so where Gitrog is drawing you cards, Selvala is giving you the mana to utilize those cards. So even at $100, well, this actually turned into $117 with a couple little adjustments. The price just hiked, actually. The only thing I changed, yeah, I didn't change much. But see, they both want to play these same types of creatures for slightly different ways, or for slightly different reasons. But the slightly different reasons are they accentuate one another. Like if you have a bunch of card draw, your bottleneck becomes mana. And if you have a ton of mana, your bottleneck becomes card draw. So if you have both, there is no bottleneck. That's the idea, right? So this is going to turn you into Neo in the Matrix. There is no spoon, except for it's going to be, there is no bottleneck. Just as an example, let's say we play out our Lupine prototype. We're loaded with dorks and kind of inexpensive, quote, fast mana. We get our Lupine prototype. We play our Selvala on turn 2. Turn 3, we tap our Selvala for 5 mana. And just don't forget, Selvala says when you tap the mana to tap, you tap a green and tap her, you can make X mana, where X is the greatest power amongst creatures you control, or maybe it's target creature, whatever. No, greatest power amongst the creatures you control. So if you have that Lupine prototype out, it's a 5/5. Selvala is going to make 5 mana in any combination of colors. So you can use that to cast Gitrog monster. And then you're in business. Then you're just swinging with the Gitrog monster. You're eating your 5/5. And you're drawing 5 cards. And you also have this other text where you can put lands into the battlefield tapped. So the two are just like peanut butter and jelly together. And you can really, I think, just take a version like mine of the Gitrog Ravenous Ride, and you can just slam Selvala in the command zone next to it, and you've got a Pride deck. I mean, really, and I think a very effective, and if your opponents are not like competitive players, probably an oppressive deck. You're just going to be making all of the mana, drawing all of the cards, and you've got efficient win conditions. Now, because we're using the Gitrog shell here, the efficient win condition we're going to be doing here is going to be to use the Hulk. We're going to have a Hulk line in here where we're going to... I just want to pause for a second and take a look at this guy. 7/7 for 2. That's gross, right? So we're going to have our Hulk package is going to be sacrifice the Hulk. And, you know, we have ways to animate the Hulk, like to get it in the bin and then animate it. But with Selvala, you probably won't even need to do that. You can just cast it. You know, you can just have your Yargle and Multani tap your Selvala for 18 mana. Get your Protean Hulk in play for 7 of it. Go to combat with your Gitrog monster. Eat the Protean Hulk with the Gitrog monster. Draw 6 cards. You know, I mean, and then you win the game on the spot, really. Because Protean Hulk, when it dies, in this deck, what it's going to do is it's going to put a little package together of Lesser Masticore. Oh, let's back up a second. If you don't know what the Protean Hulk does, when it dies, you can search your library for 6 mana value, 6 CMC worth of creatures, and put them directly into play. And so we're going to do 2 for the Lesser Masticore, leaving us 4. We're going to do 2 for Malira, leaving us 2. Then we're going to have our sack outlet. What do we go with? Viscera Seer, leaving us 1. And we're going to have our Disciple of the Vault. So that's our 6 mana's worth of creatures. Viscera Seer is going to sacrifice Lesser Masticore. Lesser Masticore has Undying. It's going to, or Persist. It's going to come back into play 1 time. And that's going to trigger your Disciple, which is going to ping. So you'll get a ping with Disciple, and then the Lesser Masticore will come back into the battlefield, and it'll try to get a neg1 counter on it. But Malira won't allow that to happen. So Malira, where the hell did she go? Malira says that creatures you control can't get neg1 counters on it. And so what this little combination is going to allow us to do is sacrifice Lesser Masticore. It'll come back into play. Sack it again. It'll come back into play. Sack it again. It'll come back into play. Each time proccing your Disciple of the Vault. And again, you're sacking it with Viscera Seer. So that's kind of a quick overview of this. It's $117, but it's not. Like, unless the price is getting away. And I just built the deck. Let's just update to cheapest. 115. It got away a little bit. It did. No, I did just put in this Selvala, but I guess the deck is up to $105. When you build really powerful CDH slanted decks, you're going to end up buying a bunch of cards that are going to go up in value. That's just how that's going to work. Because the CDH cards that like competitive players are playing this year. High power players will be playing the next year, and then like the entire community at large will be playing them not far after that. So let's go on to my personal deck. This is the deck that I'm going to take. I'm going to be rolling in there with Rakdos and Ragavan. Now, that might seem unassuming, but I've play tested this quite a lot. It's busted, but it's not like the next deck I'm going to show you. This isn't like, you know, as busted as you can possibly think to make a deck busted, but it's pretty damn good. It's powerful. So the problem with Rakdos, when you're trying to build this thing really powerfully, is when you're doing your mulligans, you need so many things. You need to be able to ramp. You need to be able to quickly get damage. Well, I guess those are the main two things. You need to quickly get damage out, and you need to be able to ramp. Well, having Ragavan in the command zone solves both of those problems. It allowed me to take a lot of the little pingers and kind of crappy cards out of the deck. I left a couple in, but just the best ones. Like just really literally a couple. But, well, what are the ones I left in? I left in Spear, Spewer, and Mardu Shadow Spear. And I think that's it. Took the rest of the little pingers out because really our Ragavan is going to play the role of our pinger. We should be able to play Ragavan. You know, we play Ragavan on turn 1 every game. And then we should be able to get through for damage on turn 2 on somebody on the second turn with our Ragavan. That's going to allow us to cast Rakdos because, one, it's going to give us the extra mana that we're going to need. Now, there's other things like Simian Spirit Guide, Dark Ritual. There's, you know, fast mana in the deck so that it's not a problem at all to come up with the 4 mana, assuming we get the Ragavan trigger or treasure. So if we ping somebody with Ragavan, we get our treasure on turn 2. Then we'll have easily, so far it's always been pretty easy to have an easy turn 2 Rakdos, because Rakdos says you can't cast them unless an opponent lost life this turn. Damage does count as life loss, so hit somebody with Ragavan, now you can cast your Rakdos. And then that's going to have you on turn 3 just going totally ridiculous. Like, you'll maybe do 6 or 8 damage just with these two things on the 3rd turn of the game. And that's going to reduce the cast cost of all of your creatures by 6 or 8 mana. And 6 is plenty. And so that's going to turn your Priest of Gix and your Priest of Urabrask mana positive by a lot. It's going to allow you to run out all of these like Burning Rune Demons, Hoarding Broodlords is the big one. Null Spine Dragon. So I've got some Eldrazi, and you will run them out some of the time, but really they're in here to shuffle your deck for like a crazy loop. But you've got these tutor creatures that you're going to be able, you play a ton of them, and you're going to be able to just go off in a couple of ways. Let's just go over a couple of the ways. So one way is you're going to run out Hoarding Broodlord, and when Hoarding Broodlord enters the battlefield, you search your library for any card, you put it in exile, and let's just say that card is Saw in Half. Okay, so Saw in Half is exiled, and whatever we exile with Hoarding Broodlord has Convoke. So you can tap the Hoarding Broodlord to cover one of the mana for the spell, and then on that turn 3, as long as you've got 2 other mana, then you can use the Saw in Half to target the Hoarding Broodlord. Now that's going to hit the Hoarding Broodlord, killing it, and it's going to give you 2 copies of Hoarding Broodlord. They're not going to be 7/6s anymore, but who cares? They will still have the same mana value. So they'll still be 8 mana creatures. They'll just be 8 mana creature tokens. Then you can search for, well, just a simple, now this is honestly not how you're going to be winning the game most of the time, but a simple thing to do is you can just get Burnt Offering or Sacrifice, preferably Burnt Offering, as one of your tutor targets that'll be exiled with one of your token Hoarding Broodlords. And then the other one can be Peer into the Abyss. Doesn't have to be, you know, but it can be Peer into the Abyss. And then what you can do is you can tap one of your tokens to cast the Sacrifice or the Burnt Offering, making 8 mana. And then you're going to be able to play the Peer into the Abyss with a combination of that 8 mana and also by tapping the other token Broodlord. And so you're just going to have mana floating probably untapped lands or an untapped land, and you're going to draw half your deck, and usually that means you're going to win the game. The other ways, I mean, that's not exactly a win condition. The win conditions are going to be more like Ancestral Statue with Witty Roastmaster. Once you've dealt damage with Rakdos, your Witty Roastmaster costs 1 red mana. In fact, your Terror of the Peaks only costs 2 red mana. So one of these two guys, along with Ancestral Statue, if you reduce the cost of Ancestral Statue to 0, you can cast it, return it to your hand, cast it, return it to your hand, and you can burn out the table with Witty Roastmaster or Terror of the Peaks. Another like really good target, tutor target to get, or just a great thing to have in your hand when you start the game with this little deck, is Razakath. If you can put Razakath into play with your Rakdos and your Ragavan and whatever other creatures in play already for 3 black mana, like once Razakath hits the, I mean, it's when Razakath comes down, it is really hard to lose from that point. Like you can tutor up whatever combination, and then if you get any resistance, you can tutor interaction. And we do have some interaction. We've got, this is a good one here. Somebody goes to counterspell, and you can Flare of Duplication their counterspell, sacrificing your Ragavan. Bolt Bend will be online the vast majority of the time in this deck. You've got both Red Blasts. Do we have both Red Blasts? Well, I would say that's an oversight. We should have both Red Blasts, but I digress. We've got Deflecting Swat, so we have if we have Razakath, we can tutor whichever piece we need. So then there's another way we can win the game by basically getting Cloudstone Curio out. Once you've cost reduced your Priest of Gix or your Priest of Urabrask, you can make infinite mana by just playing it, bouncing it, playing it, bouncing it. And this will give you another way to proc your Terror of the Peaks or Witty Roastmaster. Or you can use Dockside Extortionist with Cloudstone Curio, and that's going to give you infinite mana. But in this deck, more importantly, it's going to give you infinite ETB triggers. Now, I haven't decided in my version of the deck if I'm going to take out the Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal. I may Jeweled Lotus. I may cut the fast mana. Really, cards like Soul Ring and Mana Crypt are not that good in this exact deck. I'm not too awful worried about those. But I don't know, maybe I leave the Lotus Petal and take the rest out. But I might actually demonstrate. Let's see how we're doing on time. I might demonstrate this deck and just show you how cool this is. And then there's another thing you can do. You can basically loop. Infernal Sovereign, by the way, when that hits play for 2 mana, I mean, come on, right? I think people are sleeping on this card in general, but when you have a deck that can put it out for 2 black, that's nuts. But there's another way to loop. You can use Razakath, say Ulamog. Where is he? Not Disciple. Ruthless Technomancer. Okay, so basically you use your Razakath to tutor up one of your Shuffle Titans. You put your Shuffle Titan in play because you just have to have done 11 damage with it, which is surprisingly easy in the deck, actually. Once you've done 11 damage, you can cast this for free. You get the ETB trigger. And probably the other one's the better one to use. Kozilek, it only costs 10 and you get to draw 4 cards every time you do it. So you get this guy down for 10. I was going to say for 10 damage, which is pretty accurate. And then you sacrifice your Ragavan to tutor up your Ruthless Technomancer. And then you cast your Ruthless Technomancer for 1 black. And you sacrifice Kozilek, and that's going to give you 12 treasure tokens. Is it equal to its power? Yeah. So it's going to give you 12 treasure tokens, and it's going to shuffle your graveyard back into your library, allowing you to do it again. So you can like in response, you can sacrifice your Ruthless Technomancer to tutor another thing. Get your Ruthless Technomancer in the graveyard, let it get shuffled back in, and start tutoring the same deal. You know, same deal over and over. You're making infinite mana, but then at some point in the loop, you're going to get your Terror of Peaks into play. And now when you're putting your guys out, you're burning everybody out. That's how I played the deck originally. But what would happen is I would be cutting it really close, because you do have to pay 2 life every time you do a tutor with your Razaketh, which usually you're still able to make it work, but sometimes it was really, really thin margins, so I just added a Gary. You know, so you can kind of do the same thing. Instead of Terror of the Peaks, while you're running through this little loop, you play your Gray Merchant and you burn everybody and you gain a bunch of life. And then you sacrifice the Gray Merchant to find your Ulamog or your Kozilek, and then you put the Kozilek into play. You sacrifice a thing to find your Ruthless Technomancer. You cast it. You make a bunch of treasures. You put this into the graveyard. You shuffle your things back in, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of an overview of how the deck works. And the last thing I want to talk about, I don't know if we're going to have time to play test hands. This is, if you want to get really dirty, if you have a CDH collection, or if your LGS is crazy enough to allow proxies in their Pride event, then I'm going to show you something. Okay, you ready? Drum roll. Pride chain. Okay, so Atraxa, the Grand Unifier, is an established CDH deck. And it is a 7-mana commander without access to red. And oftentimes it wins the game with Food Chain. That's one of its win conditions, is if you're able to find your Misthalogryph or whatever they use. And I think there's not a consensus. I think sometimes they use the artifact, sometimes they use the blue one. But a cast from exile creature. They both have pros and cons. But if you can get Food Chain, you get infinite mana. You can cast Atraxa, which will allow you to reveal the top 10 cards of your library, take 1 card of every type in your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of the library. And then you can exile your Atraxa to Food Chain. It goes to the command zone. You have infinite mana, so you cast it again, exile it to Food Chain, so on and so forth. Eventually winning with, it doesn't even matter, but probably Thassa's Oracle. Okay, now the problem with a 7-mana commander is that you don't have access to red mana. Like, red in your color identity is really important if you're doing 2 things. If you're trying to power out a 7-mana anything, red is a big deal. The other thing that's a really big deal is, like, red has the best Food Chain cast from exile creature, which is Squee. But Squee happens to be a legendary creature. So what if we just pair Atraxa with Squee, so that all we have to do is find Food Chain and we win the game on the spot? And that's what I've done here with this deck. Plus you get your 5-color kind of good stuff package. I erred on the side of getting a lot of mana into play as fast as possible, and finding Food Chain as fast as possible. But I was also able to cut some of the creature tutors, because we've got the main creature that we want to tutor. I didn't cut all the creature tutors. We do have some creature tutors, but I didn't go as hard on the creature tutors as you might if you were building a Food Chain deck that was reliant on finding Squee or whichever cast from exile creature. So the idea, of course, is that Squee says that you can cast Squee from the graveyard or from exile. And Food Chain says you can remove a creature from the game to add 1 more mana than that creature costs, but it exiles it, right? So if we exile Squee, we make 4 mana. Well, we can cast Squee from exile for 3 mana. So we'll have 1 red mana left. Then we can exile Squee again, and we make 4 mana of any color. So we're going to do red first, going up 1 red every iteration until we have infinite red mana. And then we'll start doing it for all of the other colors so that we can infinitely cast our Atraxa Grand Unifier. And draw your deck, basically. Just draw your deck and find the pieces you need to win the game. The main kill condition is just going to be a single copy of Thassa's Oracle. We've just got the Thoracle here. Once you've drawn your entire deck, you just put Thassa's Oracle out and win the game. One of the things I don't like about, I tried to build Atraxa for CDH. One of the things I didn't like about it is there's like a lot of really powerful cards competing for just the 99 slots, and it was hard to fit a good backup plan in. So it's like I ended up just playing Thassa's Oracle and like Praetor's Grasp, you know, with Tainted Pact or something. Or maybe it was, no, I went with Mnemonic Betrayal. That's what it was. But that doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel all that safe. But once we get access to red mana, now we can play Underworld Breach. And I know, snooze fest, right? Like 5-color, good stuff kind of a deck. But it just gives you access to a very easy secondary win condition that's using very high card quality to pull it off. So Underworld Breach, you're just going to use Lion's Eye Diamond, Underworld Breach, and wow, there's lots of options. Wheel of Fortune to dig through your deck and cast lots of spells and find whatever you need. Or you've got Intuition, where you can use Intuition, you choose Savine's Reclamation, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Underworld Breach, and you give your opponent their choice of which cards go in your graveyard and which goes in your hand, and it doesn't matter. If you've got a few cards in the bin, a little bit of mana open, if you have, it doesn't matter. If they hand you the Lion's Eye Diamond, then you're going to use, you're going to crack it for mana, then for white mana, say. Then you're going to use the flashback ability on Savine's Reclamation to return the Lion's Eye Diamond and the Underworld Breach both into play. And then you can crack the Lion's Eye Diamond for 3 blue, and you used Intuition to get to this point, so it's obviously in your graveyard. And then you're going to recast Intuition to find Brain Freeze, and doesn't really matter what else, but you're going to start brain freezing yourself, putting a bunch of cards into the bin so that you can exile a bunch of them to keep recasting Brain Freeze and build up this huge storm count. And once your storm count is at like 20, then you're going to start turning your Brain Freeze on your opponents. So you're going to mill everybody out. And, you know, like a 20 storm count does not mill a person out. But you can just keep casting the Brain Freeze over and over until it mills every opponent out. So that's kind of your backup plan in the deck. The main kind of primary game plan is just get your food chain and win with Squee. Secondarily is to actually run your Atraxa out, which once you add red to this deck, it's not that hard to do. You've got Lotho, you've got Dorks, you've got Tinderwall, Ragavan, Dockside Extortionist, Simian Spirit Guide. And if you can run the Atraxa out, I put food chain or Displacer Kitten in the deck because Displacer Kitten and Atraxa is just so fun. It's like, you know, you cast any spell and then you find a bunch more spells, and then you cast one of those spells and find a bunch more spells, and so on. Other than that, we're running a bunch of tutors, a bunch of interaction, and only the best tutors for creatures. I went with Finale of Devastation, Eldritch Evolution, and I think just Eldamri's Call. I think those are the only straight, only tutors, or only creature tutors. We're playing Veil of Summer, Silence, of course, and then just a big fat supply of Mana Rocks, Carpet of Flowers, Remora, Sylvan Library. If you don't like this card, I don't know, I don't get it. But also, we just want to have kind of a density of enchantments in the deck so that when we are on the Atraxa plan, we're able to hit an enchantment, because, you know, diversifying the types of cards in your deck is sort of at least a consideration when you're playing Atraxa, so that you can draw, quote, as many cards as possible each time you cast or flicker it. I thought about doing the Dual Caster Mage Twin Flame combo in the deck too, because then you could use Dual Caster, or you could use Heat Shimmer and Twin Flame to get the Atraxa ETB, but I thought it was just kind of win more, because, I mean, honestly, by the time you've got Atraxa in play, you probably are on your way to winning. And Dualcaster Mage Twin Flame is just not the best combo. It just loses to like everything. We do have, didn't I put, I think this is also a, yeah. We also have Ad Nauseam. And we've got Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation. So we can just kind of naturally get our Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation off and just win the game that way. Tons of free counter spells. And also in Atraxa, I don't think you'd usually be able to play the free spells. Well, I mean, you'd only have even access to Fierce Guardianship. But Atraxa is not out all the time, so you don't necessarily want to play Fierce Guardianship. But because when you're tapping out to play Atraxa, you're going to have a grip of new cards, there is a high premium in the deck on playing free spells. Well, here we've got our Squee that we can run out a lot easier. That will turn on Fierce Guardianship, and because we're in red and we have a 3-mana commander, we can play Deflecting Swat. So that's, I think, 2 pretty big upgrades right there. But the big upgrade, obviously, is just Dockside Extortionist. You could also do this with, you could put Temur Sabertooth in, so that you could go infinite mana with Dockside and Temur Sabertooth, and then you could bounce the Atraxa over and over, or probably better than that would be a Meal. You could play a Meal Dockside, and then you could just keep flickering Atraxa over and over. But I digress. That's not the way I decided to go. My only real like big nod to Atraxa as a commander that we're going to play out for value was Displacer Kitten. And Displacer Kitten works with other stuff in the deck. I mean, it's obviously busted with... it's not bad with your Mana Rocks. It's busted with Mana Vault. It's busted with Dockside. So there's other things that it does. But, you know, the best thing to do with it is to play out your Atraxa and flicker it over and over and over and win the game that way. So this is my truly, like, if you have a CDH collection or proxying is an option, or I've heard of some CDH, well, I've heard of a CDH channel that's going to be doing Pride events. You have like a Discord open where you can find Pride event type games, and I think it'd be fun to do that. What else? I think that is all I have to talk about as far as these decks go. So let's go back over them again. We've got $91.34. Is It Treasures the Deck? We've got a 1-card win condition with Glinthorn Buccaneer with our commander Malcolm. That just wins the game on the spot, Malcolm and Glinthorn. We've got Magda, where 5 treasures and a type change, or 5 treasures plus an adaptive automaton or bloodline pretender, or one of your artifact changelings just wins the game on the spot, or Magda plus 10 treasures just always wins the game on the spot. And if I were going to do some test hands, I think the ones that I think are the most interesting are going to be Gitrog and Rakdos. This was the one. Playtesting this is so much fun. Like, it just does the thing. Like, game after game after game, it's just going to do the thing. But the thing is not like, you know, have infinite interaction and win the game on turn 2. It's more like have a decent bit of interaction and win the game very consistently on turn 3. Yeah, and that may be too much. But I'm going to leave that up to you guys. I'm just giving you the information. You decide how broken you want to get for this thing. Until next time. Oh, you know what? Put whatever your ideas for decks are in the comments, please. I'd love to take a look at them. I've got tons more. One, I heard somebody bring up, where did I saw this in 2 spots, and it never occurred to me. But another really busted, if you're trying to go full out CDH, break the format busted, is Dahada and Kinnan, right? So now you're in 5 colors. Your commander's not even going to be free. It's going to go mana positive. It makes treasures enough to pay for itself naturally, but if you have Kinnan out, it's going to double the amount of mana the treasures make. I'll leave that for another video. But put the decks you're interested in, things you're thinking about playing, in the comments. I'd love to take a look at it. And if there's anything that you want to see in the future, if you're interested in actually seeing the goldfish hands from any of these decks, let me know about that. Communicate with me, people. I need your communication to make the channel better. Until next time, this is the mostly budget pub stomper. Word to your father, because remember, we don't play by the rules on budget pub stomper. I know most of you are thinking, no, it's word to your mother, but today it's word to your father. Word to your father. I think I normally say east side until I die, but today it's west side. So west side until you die. Word to your fathers. May the force be with you, and namaste, nerds. Namaste, homies. I don't want to keep calling you nerds. That's insulting, right? Namaste, homies.